Standing down at the foot of the dam, looking up, my reaction to it was, wow, we can do that?
It's as massive as the pyramids and as beautiful as the Taj Mahal. It was a gorgeous sight.
It changed forever the character of the Southwest.
There was no other dam to compare with it. It was the dam.
It's an engineering feat. That's a lot of concrete.
Sun, surf, and high living. Hollywood glitterati. The ultimate icon of the West Coast is Los Angeles. But without one single great structure, it might all become dust. Thousands of acres of rich farmland would dry up. The Southwest would return to desert. The City of Angels would go dark. Because the growth of Los Angeles was powered not by the famous California sunshine, but by water. Water from the Colorado River, harnessed by the greatest dam ever built. No construction job was so ambitious. No dam was higher. No reservoir was bigger. No power plant was so productive. In every aspect, it was the greatest ever built. It was the world's largest and most important, Hoover Dam.
That was the first major river plug in the world. There'd been lots of dams built clear back from the Middle Ages. 20, 30, 40, maybe 100-foot structures to divert rivers. But here was the first major river plug in the world that would store 2 or 3 years of runoff behind a massive man-made structure. So Hoover Dam was really the bellwether for the great dam construction period that soon started thereafter.
Hoover Dam controlled the Colorado River for the first time and put an end to unpredictable floods. With it, the river could literally be turned on or off. Hoover Dam transformed the entire Southwest.
There wouldn't be out here. There couldn't be an out here. There was no water. It'd be desert like it was.
It was a great place for a young man 18 years old to come and spend his life working career. A great place.
They called it the dam. There were no others. There was no other dam to compare with it. It was the dam.
平日夜、見たこともない世界があなたを待ち受けます。午後11時から午前1時まで。月曜チャレンジ、火曜ディスカバリーサイエンス、水曜シビリゼーション、木曜トラベル&アドベンチャー、金曜パワーゾーン。月曜から金曜の夜はディスカバリーチャンネル。
세자 그사나게 제비 그사나게 깨유 나니마 어콜루 하비비 저비 할레비 저비 그사나게 제비
世界最大の大陸、私たちのふるさと、アジアンアワー毎週放送。アジア各地の風土、人、そしてそこに息づく精神を映します。アジアンアワー毎週土曜ディスカバリーチャンネル。
Behind Hoover Dam is the largest man-made reservoir in North America. Lake Mead holds enough water to cover the state of New York 1 foot deep. Filling the reservoir actually warped the Earth's crust and caused earthquakes. All that water presses on the dam with about 80 billion pounds of pressure.
80 billion pounds is, well, I always like to figure things out in terms of elephants. That's about 1.5 million elephants. Or in maybe more modern ways of looking at it, that's about 100,000 fully loaded 727s.
The sheer size of Hoover Dam gets lost in the numbers. For comparison, the Statue of Liberty stands proudly at 305 feet. The Great Pyramid sits at 449 feet, while the Washington Monument soars to more than 555 feet. Hoover Dam rises triumphantly to 726 feet tall. At the crest, Hoover is just 45 feet wide, but that's plenty of room for a busy road connecting Arizona and Nevada. At the base, it spreads to 660 feet thick. There is enough concrete in the dam to build a 2-lane highway from Los Angeles to Boston. Hoover is a gigantic, awe-inspiring structure.
To stand on that deck of the power plant and hear those turbines silently churning out pollution-free energy, and to look up at that massive, massive and beautiful structure of concrete, as massive as the pyramids and as beautiful as the Taj Mahal, it was a gorgeous sight. I marveled that man was capable of designing and planning and constructing such a magnificent structure. And I couldn't help but think that those other monuments, the pyramids and Taj Mahal, were monuments to the dead. But here was a monument to the living. This was creating energy and storing floodwaters and making possible the irrigation of thousands of acres of land and the municipal industrial water supplies for millions of people. It's a magnificent structure and a very useful one.
The Colorado River started as just a trickle of melting snow high in the Rocky Mountains. Gathering water from 7 western states, it carved the spectacular Grand Canyon. The river flowed past the dam site, sliced through the Mojave and Sonoran deserts, and ran 50 miles through Mexico into the Gulf of California. The river was so silty, it was said to be too thick to drink, too thin to plow.
The Colorado River, before we plugged it with dams, was a maverick river. It ran almost too thick to drink. You could almost walk across it with the silt that it carried. And it was always dirty, whether it was running 10,000 cubic feet per second or 100,000 cubic feet per second. It was carrying its full capacity of silt. The explorer that came up from the mouth of the river said when he got there, he said, "I'm probably the last person who will ever use this river. It said, there's nothing here."
The water was so valuable that attempts were made to irrigate California's Imperial Valley with canals. The results were disastrous. In 1905, the river flooded 150 square miles with water 60 feet deep.
I think the words that would easiest spring to mind of the earlier river was useless and destructive and dangerous. First thing that had to be done is to tame those annual floods, and that was the prime purpose behind Hoover Dam. Stop the flooding.
Serious speculation about building a great dam went back as far as 1902. For nearly 2 decades, scores of possible sites were surveyed and studied. The search narrowed to 2 locations with the right geology and terrain for a huge dam. In 1922, the Reclamation Service recommended building a dam at or near Boulder Canyon. The decision to build was made in 1928 when Congress passed the Boulder Canyon Project Act. The name Boulder Dam stuck and caused confusion for years to come. While the dam was still a dream, the country plunged into the nightmare of the Great Depression. In 1929, the stock market crash of October 29th was known as Black Tuesday. In the next 3 years, 13 million people lost their jobs. The unemployment rate shot up above 23%. Hopes of Americans plummeted.
The Great Depression, as I remember, was a time when everybody I knew didn't have a job. We just simply had to get by the best way we could. During the Depression, it was really that bad.
With a price tag of $165 million, the dam was by far the biggest federal project ever funded. Today, the dam would cost an estimated $4 billion. But during the Depression, construction companies were swimming in red ink. So who could build the world's biggest dam? The answer was in teamwork. Several big construction companies joined up to form one giant one. The consortium, called 6 Companies, was hired to build the dam.
Well, we can look back from this vantage point and say it seems as if it were easily done. All we had to do was build a dam. But when you look at the dam and say, that's all we had to do is just do that, it looks like it was a monumental task, and it was, especially for the time, for the capability of engineering and supply logistics. It stretched the breaking point on all of those.
More than half of all Americans were living below the poverty level. Desperate job seekers went anywhere and did anything to find work.
Since one of the criteria was to be 21 years old, why it didn't bother my conscience a bit to tell him I was 21 years old when I was only 18. And things like that, it was the most important thing in life at that time for me was to get a good job. And I would stoop to almost anything, including lying about my age, to get a job.
But what was bad for the country was good for 6 Companies. The promise of work drew hungry people from nearly every state. Hundreds showed up in search of work, even though the construction job hadn't begun yet.
As to this depression, they were flocking into Las Vegas from all over the United States. So 6 Companies never had it so good because they had the cream of the crop. They had the nation's best labor at the price they wanted to pay them.
Bureau engineers settled on Black Canyon as the site for the dam. 30 miles from Las Vegas, it had the solid rock needed to anchor the immense dam and a huge area upstream to hold the reservoir. But this stretch of river that separated Nevada from Arizona was the worst site for work. There were no roads or railways, nothing but rock, the river, and the hot sun. In the summer of '31, the average temperature at Black Canyon was 119 degrees. Still, they came. The first to arrive struggled to get by in a group of encampments called Ragtown. Whole families camped out in the stifling heat. There was no place to live, no housing, no facilities.
Well, the conditions were just absolutely awful. On the 16th of August, 1931, 3 women died of the heat. They just died of heat prostration.
The specter of death would hang over the work site and the makeshift homes of the families of the dam workers.
And my mother was there with us kids and no tent. So she took what blankets she had because it was just scorching hot, and she went right down to the river and she just dashed them into the water, and then she came back and she held those and we sat around her. Now, I don't know how many days it was. It was a few days before we were able to get a tent at all. And of course, when my father came home, he grabbed some sticks, and we found a couple of creosote bushes, and we kind of spread things over those, and that's where we stayed. So for a little while, we were the poorest of the poor, and then we got a tent, and someone else was poorer than we, which wasn't a particularly good feeling, but you had made a little progress.
The heat was bad, but the geography of the construction site was worse. The Colorado River flowed between canyon walls 1,000 feet high. This hellish spot is where the dam finally rose.
Somewhere in that history, there's the first guy to pick up a shovel and say, well, I think I'll start digging right here. You know, wow. And then if he was still here 5 years later, to look back and see what resulted from that first shovel full of dirt just boggles my mind.
The challenge ahead in Black Canyon was remarkable, but so was the transformation about to happen a few miles away in a quiet mining town called Las Vegas. Just a fraction of the electricity from Hoover Dam went to Nevada, but it helped power the air conditioning and neon lights that made Las Vegas famous.
Easy money.
Without the dam, Las Vegas would dry up. It has the highest per capita water consumption in the world, twice as high as Phoenix, 4 times as high as Philadelphia. Today, the region gets 85% of that water from the Colorado River. But back when Hoover Dam was finished, everyone expected Las Vegas would return to being the dusty train stop it was. Workers who came to Las Vegas in search of jobs had to wait for the project boss. 6 companies sent in America's greatest dam builder, Frank T. Crow, a strapping, tall construction boss who swore he'd never work behind a desk. Crow had built dams from Montana to California, but this dam would be the biggest ever built.
He was a legend even in his own time. His summary comment on what it meant to manage a construction job the size of Hoover Dam, he said, we've got 7,000 men working in that canyon, and he said, my job is to make sure they don't kill each other off.
It was a challenge just to get men and materials to the construction site. So the first order of business was to extend the Union Pacific Railway and link Black Canyon with Las Vegas. High voltage lines were erected to bring needed power into the canyon from California. Years later, those same lines would carry valuable electricity out. The plan of attack was to tunnel through the solid rock of the canyon walls, opening not 1, but 4 enormous tunnels, each one big enough to hold a 5-story building. The river would be diverted to flow through the tunnels, while the dam was built on the empty riverbed.
The building of Hoover Dam really was an engineering breakthrough. I could safely say that the Bureau of Reclamation cut its engineering teeth on the building of Hoover Dam. Many of the techniques are fairly mundane, but the size, the logistics, the things that had to be done in order to build Hoover Dam were at the time just beyond the capability. So this was a real stretch in all of the engineering sciences and in construction methods.
And Frank Crow needed breakthroughs. He had just over 2 years to divert the river, or 6 companies would have to pay fines of $3,000 every day they were late. So how could Frank Crowe speed the trip through solid rock? He attacked each tunnel from 4 directions. The tunnels were dug in from both ends. At the same time, crews worked from an additional tunnel cut from the center out. Time-saving drilling rigs 3 stories tall were invented just for these tunnels. They called them jumbos. 30 drills rode on platforms attached to a heavy truck. It would be backed against the face of the tunnel wall, where miners drilled the holes for dynamite.
And then you back the jumbo out of the way so you hope you don't blow it up too, and you pop off the dynamite. And if everything works out right, you've got the holes in the right place and the right amount of dynamite, it cracks all that rock up. Then you move all that muck out of the way and you do it again.
The tunnels were blasted out just 10 to 20 feet at a time. It was hot, dirty, hazardous work. But in the minds of the workers, the better-than-average pay made up for the danger.
Because I've worked in temperatures of 135 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit. That's how hot it was. That's how hot it was. But again, like I say, once I got seasoned in, why, I felt good that I was going to bring home $28 a week. I felt good about that.
The rubble from the blasting, called muck, was hauled out by a steady flow of trucks. Each trip was a dangerous traverse up narrow roads out of the canyon.
And some of those trucks were so big that you couldn't even see around them. You see some of the old construction movies of the truck drivers that they didn't wear shoes because when they had to back the truck up, they had to put it in reverse gear and then jump up on the back of the seat and look over the back of the truck and steer with their feet. Now, that's not exactly what I call easy truck driving.
You're not even sitting in the truck where the steering wheel is at all. You're out here like this and you're steering it with your left hand. You're giving her the gas with your right heel on the throttle. And then you can reach in from this direction with your left foot and push in the clutch and shift gears. These things had high-speed reverse in them. And I mean, you put them into high-speed reverse, even with a load on, well, they'd settle down like that. And they had big motors in them, and they'd wheel right back in there.
1.5 million cubic yards of rock was trucked out of the canyon and dumped nearby. Getting all that rock out of the tunnels wasn't enough. Now they had to be lined with 3 feet of concrete to make sure the water would flow smoothly and efficiently. But the hard part was still to come, moving the river. On November 13, 1932, a dynamite charge cleared the entrance to a tunnel on the Arizona side of the canyon. Trucks began dumping muck and rock into the Colorado River, the same rock that had been dug out of the tunnels. The trucks came all night long, one every 15 seconds.
Well, the big challenge, of course, comes when you have to close the river off and force it to use the tunnels. It's not anxious to leave its channel. And as the river narrows down, it becomes quite independent. It doesn't want to leave.
For 20 hours, the water steadily rose. Finally, the next morning, the river crested the opening and began flowing through the tunnel. The Colorado River had been wrested from its ancient riverbed. Frank Crowe saw that it was done nearly a full year before the deadline. To keep the river at bay, earthen barriers called cofferdams were built above and below the mile-long construction site. For the first time in history, the Colorado riverbed was laid bare. But the most dramatic and dangerous job took place high above.
Some fellow with, in my view, must have a death wish, hooks himself on a rope and lowers himself over the side of the canyon with a pry bar in his hand.
極限状態に生きるエキストリームディスカバリー、今晩ディスカバリーチャンネル。
ご心配なく、これからは携帯が見たい番組のスケジュールを知らせてくれます。新しくなったディスカバリーのホームページでお申し込み手続きが簡単にできます。さらにメールマガジンでチャンネル最新情報もキャッチ。クリックで発見、新しいディスカバリー。世界最大の大陸、私たちのふるさと、アジアンアワー、毎週放送。アジア各地の風土、人、そしてそこに息づく精神を映します。アジアンアワー、毎週土曜ディスカバリーチャンネル。毎週お楽しみいただいているディスカバリーサンデーが日本語吹き替え放送になりました。毎週日曜日、さまざまなテーマを取り上げ、世界を深く見つめます。ディスカバリーサンデー、日曜ディスカバリーチャンネル。
7月のプレミア、アニマルプラネット。不思議の庭の生き物たち。私たちの身近にある見たこともない世界。オシアの大冒険。辺境へと足を踏み入れる男が珍しい生き物たちを見出す。両生類の研究。人の腕が丸ごと入る大きさの口を持つ冷血動物。妖艶な花。数多くの品種を持つ蘭。その繁栄の鍵に両乱する作望とは。7月のプレミア、アニマルプラネット。
More than half a century after its completion, the massive concrete wedge called Hoover Dam still inspires awe.
I think the actual size of Hoover Dam gets lost when you approach it from the canyon walls. You get a better perspective down at the toe of the dam when you're standing down there looking up at it.
This titanic slab of concrete is nearly as thick at the base as it is tall.
Even dam haters have to admire Hoover Dam when they visit it. It's a gorgeous structure.
If this dam failed, the disaster would be unprecedented. The engineers had to be absolutely sure the dam would hold. They did it by actually combining two designs into one plan.
Hoover Dam is a concrete gravity arch dam. What that means is it retains some of its ability to hold back water through the sheer weight of it. That's the gravity portion. And then the arch portion helps to spread the forces of all the water it holds back by the curved upstream face with the water pushing against it, jamming it into the mountain that it's built into.
Bronze statues symbolizing the soaring imagination of the builders sit upon the crest of the dam. Nearby, a plaque honors the lives lost. In a strange twist of fate, the first death on the Boulder Canyon project was a Bureau of Reclamation worker who drowned. The last was his son, who died in a fall. In all, 112 men lost their lives. Thousands more gave their hearts and souls to the greatest dam ever built.
And there was no such a thing as a safety officer on the Hoover Dam project. There was no safety officer. So you better look out for yourself. If they're blasting in one of those big diversion tunnels there, and you've probably seen the rig, that jumbo, how it went in there, so they'd back the rig up, and the blasting whistle, we're going to blast, take cover. So maybe, of course, they're just shooting this way, see, breaking out so much rock, it wasn't flying all over. So maybe you get the heck out of there, find a place where you're not going to get hit, or you hope you wouldn't.
Sometimes safety was sacrificed for speed. The dangerous buildup of exhaust in the tunnels was never officially listed as a cause of death.
Carbon monoxide was the baby that took the lives. The carbon monoxide that the big trucks gave off. It was deplorable. They got around that by calling it pneumonia.
No job was more dangerous than that of the men who dangled on the canyon walls. Loose rock had to be removed, and huge notches where the dam would lock into the cliffs, called keys, had to be blasted out.
One of the first main jobs that had to be done for construction of the dam was the job of cleaning the rock and rubble off the sides of the canyon itself, so that workers can come into the canyon below with some assurance that they're not going to get beamed by a falling rock. This is a job that's called high scaling.
High scalers sat in bosun's chairs, a plank of wood little more than a swing seat. Attached to a main rope, they rappelled down the side of the cliff. But high scalers never went empty-handed. They had to carry heavy pry bars, tools, and 40-pound jackhammers. The cliffs were a jumble of tangled rope and air hoses. Everything they carried down had to be hauled out on the climb back up.
That job of high scaling, if you can visualize this, here you're hanging off a cliff with an iron bar in your hand and you're prying away at cracks and crevices on the side of the mountain there, with no assurance whatsoever that the rock you're standing on is not the rock that's going to get pried loose instead of the one you thought was going to go. So this job of high scaling was a real white knuckle sort of job, and it's not a job that I would have wanted.
If necessity is the mother of invention, Hoover Dam was her nursery. In another first, the hard hat was invented here. So many men were hit by falling debris, they made up their own safety helmets.
That hard hat was essentially one of these pith helmets, like are worn in the African safaris, with a real thick coating of coal tar enamel on it to kind of harden up the outside of it.
Some of the high scalers were said to be former sailors and circus performers. Mostly, they were hard-working men like Dorothy Rand's father, Joe Klein.
High scalers. They were high scalers, yes. And there were lots of them. There were a lot of high scalers.
Dorothy's mother took her to the river to see her father work the cliffs. The high scalers would dangle on hundreds of feet of rope.
So he was very small, and we used binoculars mostly to look at him out there. They would start at the top, they were responsible for their own ropes. They had to tie them all and everything, then, no one else would be responsible for their lives. So each day they had to prepare their ropes and go down over the side. They would drill the holes first, insert the dynamite, then back away, and the blast would go off. They would go in then and clean the rock away. They don't move slowly. They're bouncing around out there. They use their legs a lot and bounce from spot to spot until they see a place that needs to be worked on.
Now, a high scaler up there on the side of the cliff, if he had guts enough to wrestle a jackhammer while up in the air, they paid him $5.60. The guy that just bore down the rock, the loose rock and everything, he got $5.
Hundreds of feet below on the canyon floor, Tommy Nelson was a flagman, controlling the chaotic flow of trucks to the busy electric shovels.
Just to show you how highball that job was, this flagging position I had, they had about 200 big dump trucks down there that I'm trying to keep track of. I heard a swish-swash of an air hose. way up high on the Nevada side. And lo and behold, here comes a high scaler. Apparently he may not have got tied off properly or the air hose broke. Who knows what happened? But he lit very close to where I'm standing. So naturally, I made a mad dash over there. Nothing I could do for him. So I really went back to my position. And along come a hard-boiled superintendent. There was trucks stacking up there. He said to me, "What are you going to do with all these blankety-blank trucks? Eat them!" I said, "I'm trying to get them going. There's a man killed here. Get them moving. He can't hurt anybody." Okay. All that for $4 a day, 50 cents an hour, 7 days a week, 2 days off a year, optional without pay.
For 4 months, they pried and blasted away to prepare the cliffs for the dam. The high scalers removed enough rock to fill a train nearly 160 miles long. In the process, they detonated 185 tons of dynamite. When the smoke and dust had cleared, the canyon was ready to take concrete. The most immense dam ever built began to rise.
You've seen these large cement trucks rolling down the highway with the turning barrel on them. The amount of concrete that went into that canyon in 2 years would represent 1 truck per second, 24 hours a day for 2 years.
The canyon was a sight to behold in 1933 as crews raced around the clock to clear the riverbed. It took 6 months to dig through 40 feet of mud, muck, and silt to reach bedrock. Then, workers cleared a 75-foot deep channel that would anchor the dam.
You finally got the bedrock exposed. You finally have all the muck out. You've washed it down. You've scoured it. And now you're ready. So you bring the first bucket of concrete down there and dump it on that bedrock and put your vibrators in it and spread it out. And that's a very exciting moment.
Newsreel cameras rolled as the first bucket of concrete was placed.
It was on June 6, 1933, that the first bucket of concrete was placed in the very lowest of the dam forms, 135 feet below the level where a few months previously had flowed the unchallenged Colorado River.
The dam rose just like stacking building blocks, each block 5 feet deep. When one block set enough, the next went in on top. It would take a mountain of concrete to finish the dam, enough to pave a 4-foot wide sidewalk around the earth at the equator. Engineers had to find a consistent source of gravel to make the concrete. Aggregate, the stone and gravel mixed with cement to make concrete, was found upstream from the dam. The Colorado itself had provided the rock to build the river plug. Railroad cars carried the aggregate to 2 mixing plants near the dam. At the time, these plants were the ultimate in automation. The problem that remained was how to get the concrete to the dam before it hardened.
The job of placing concrete for the dam was awesome in its own right.
The answer came from above. Frank Crow pioneered the use of cableways, a spider web of cables stretched over the canyon. Electric motors powered huge drums of cable to lift and lower heavy payloads to any spot on the dam site. A single bucket weighed 16 tons and carried almost as much concrete as a modern cement truck.
Now, you can visualize what this looks like from down below. Here comes this bucket of concrete just fast as that operator can get it there. And your job when it gets there is to pull a lever that dumps that bucket. The next thing you try to do is stay alive, because that thing is going right back up in the air about 50 feet.
Now, people talk about pouring concrete. Actually, concrete properly done is placed. It's not liquid enough to be poured. You dump a bucket full of concrete, then you have to go in there with vibrators and vibrate it into position.
Concrete was poured so fast that stories spread about workers being buried in the dam.
There's myths about people being buried in the concrete, and of course that is a myth. They managed to retrieve the bodies of everybody who expired.
The chemical reaction that takes place as concrete hardens gives off heat. Engineers figured that the concrete in Hoover Dam would take 150 years to cool. Uneven cooling would cause the concrete to crack and make it useless. There had to be a solution, and engineers found one: refrigeration. A giant cooling plant was built, capable of freezing 1,000 tons of ice a day. Refrigeration pipes were laid every 5 feet through the freshly placed concrete. The system cooled the dam in just 20 months. Then, the empty pipes themselves were pumped full of concrete.
It's an engineering feat, but let's don't discount labor. Labor is what made that dam possible. Labor. And I'm glad that I was part of it.
The flow of water to the power plants is controlled through 4 intake towers. With the lake full, only the tops are visible. What you don't see is that beneath the water, each one is 34 stories tall. Building the intake towers was like constructing skyscrapers on the walls of the canyon. Water would enter through the intake towers and flow into huge pipes called penstocks. The penstocks ran through the canyon walls and fed water to the turbines in the power plants below the dam. There, the water returned to the Colorado River. Pipes this big had never been made before. They were 30 feet in diameter and made of 2-inch thick steel. A fabrication plant was built just to fashion the enormous pieces. Each section weighed in at 170 tons. Special trailers were needed to haul the pipes along 1.5 miles of winding road to the canyon rim. There, the sections were lowered down to the tunnels on a 200-ton capacity cableway. Workers nudged the sections into place inside the tunnels and hammered them together. The penstocks became the river's new home.
One of the places where you really feel that deep humming vibration is when you're in the penstock viewing room, because you're standing right on top of the main delivery pipe, and there's water flowing through there about 7,000 cubic feet per second. The speed is about 100 miles an hour, and that much water creates a vibration that is almost below the level of hearing, but it kind of shakes your insides as you're standing on top of the pipe. So that's a fairly spectacular, fairly awesome thing to feel, that thundering vibration of the river as it's going through the pipes in the dam. That's the river. It doesn't seem like it, but you can walk underneath the Colorado River.
Before the last concrete was placed, the diversion gates were closed. It took 6.5 years to fill the reservoir. What used to be 110 miles of desert and canyon became the largest man-made lake ever and the country's first national recreation area. Ironically, people flocked to the desert to play in the water. As the dam neared completion, times were still tough, but the long road to economic recovery had begun. President Hoover had been voted out, and Franklin D. Roosevelt was in. And amazingly, 6 companies had built the world's largest dam 2 years ahead of schedule.
And they made nothing but money because it turned out real good. Frank Crowe, when he left with a bonus of $369,000. That's how important Frank Crowe was.
Today, that's like getting a paycheck for about $8 million. September 30th, 1935. 12,000 people jammed the dam site to hear President Roosevelt dedicate the monumental structure, known then as Boulder Dam.
How well I remember that. And how well I remember what he said. He says, I compliment you. I commend you for this accomplishment.
To congratulate you who have builded Boulder Dam, and on behalf of the nation, to say to you, well done.
The dam was nearly done, but the work was far from over. The power of the water was yet to be unleashed, and an amazing space, hidden inside, waited to be revealed.
未来を知りたい、世界を見たい、リアリティを感じたい。ハイクオリティのドキュメンタリーで世界の好奇心を集めるディスカバリーチャンネルからビッグチャンス。7月25日から8月20日の期間中、ディスカバリーチャンネルを見て簡単なアンケートに答えると、プラズマテレビやコクーンなど豪華商品を抽選で10名様にプレゼント。応募方法はホームページまたは携帯電話から。たくさんのご応募お待ちしております。世界最大の大陸、私たちのふるさと、アジアンアワー、毎週放送。アジア各地の風土、人、そしてそこに息づく精神を映します。アジアンアワー、毎週土曜ディスカバリーチャンネル。
半世紀に及ぶ朝鮮半島の分断、イデオロギーによって分かたれた民族。人々は郷里に焦がれた。
일세들이 다 죽기 전에 안타까운 마음을 갖고 있는 그 마음이 다 죽기 전에
希望をつなぐ一筋の川、再会への旅路。7月27日夜9時ディスカバリーサンデー。あなたは霊魂の存在を信じますか？信仰と死後の世界ウィーク、近日放送プレミアディスカバリー。
The concrete in Hoover Dam is still curing, so the structure actually becomes stronger every day. But it's a fact that the dam is not completely solid. Inspection tunnels and passageways, off limits to the public, cut through the dam at 6 levels. And to the surprise of many, there are leaks.
Of course, a dam leaks a little bit all the time. And we like to see it leak a little bit in a controlled way, because that means that the pressure of the water upstream is spread evenly throughout the concrete. If it didn't leak, that meant that all of it were up at the face of the dam. That would be probably a fairly dangerous thing to have happen. So we like to see it leaking just a little bit. We have collection systems to pick up that leakage water and measure it to ensure that it's not growing, that it's just a stable sort of seep.
Every dam needs a safety valve, so gigantic spillways, big enough to float a battleship, flank either side of Hoover Dam. They weren't needed until a record-setting flood season in 1983. Excess water was released into the spillways and sent crashing through the tunnels. Without Hoover Dam, uncontrolled floods destroyed man-made canals, making irrigation impossible. With the dam, arid desert was transformed into productive farmland. But in Los Angeles, the cause for celebration was the arrival of electricity.
Here's the climax of the great Boulder Dam project. The first flash of power is received at Los Angeles by these giant transformers. Bright lights and sparkling girls. The city is electrified all right.
The dam's generators powered the Southern California aircraft factories that helped win World War II. More than 75% of the electricity that fueled LA's amazing growth came from Hoover.
There's no doubt that the building of Hoover Dam changed forever the character of the Southwest.
That energy for change emanated from the U-shaped power plant at the base of the dam. Each massive wing could easily hold 3 football fields. The biggest generators ever constructed were assembled here in 1936 and began sending power to 3 states. In 1939, the Hoover Dam power plants became the world's largest hydroelectric facility.
Being on the floor of the power plant and standing beside one of the generators is an awesome thing especially for an electrical engineer who knows what's happening inside the guts of that generator. The thousands of amps of current, the high voltages, the inertia of that spinning rotor, the awesome energy that's just wrapped up in a very small place there is something to really contemplate.
Once the most expensive project ever funded by the federal government, Hoover Dam actually paid for itself by selling electricity.
So it's a very valuable asset. The pollution-free energy from falling water, no acid rain, no noise pollution, no water pollution. This is a way to make energy.
Although no longer the tallest, Hoover Dam is still the most celebrated.
There are dams over 900 feet high in the world now. None of them as famous as Hoover because Hoover was first.
And Hoover Dam holds a special place in the hearts and minds of the people who built it.
I think the dam was the pride and joy of every man who worked on it or had any part in its construction.
This was the first really good job I ever had. And of course, by today's standards, it wouldn't be considered a very good job. But to me, it was a wonderful job.
It's gratifying to me to know that I played a part in building that structure. I'm compelled when I go down there to hold my hand over my heart because that dam was a part of me. It just had to be, going through it from the very beginning to the conclusion.
Hoover Dam is more than a massive concrete wedge. It stands in triumph, a testament to human ingenuity that transformed the American West. No dam was higher, no reservoir was bigger, no power plant was so productive. In every aspect, it was the greatest ever built. It was the world's largest and most important, Hoover Dam.
That was the first major river plug in the world. There'd been lots of dams built clear back from the Middle Ages. 20, 30, 40, maybe 100-foot structures to divert rivers. But here was the first major river plug in the world that would store 2 or 3 years of runoff behind a massive man-made structure. So Hoover Dam was really the bellwether for the great dam construction period that soon started thereafter.
Hoover Dam controlled the Colorado River for the first time and put an end to unpredictable floods. With it, the river could literally be turned on or off. Hoover Dam transformed the entire Southwest.
There wouldn't be out here. There couldn't be an out here. There was no water. It'd be desert like it was.
It was a great place for a young man 18 years old to come and spend his life working career. A great place.
They called it the dam. There were no others. There was no other dam to compare with it. It was the dam.
平日夜、見たこともない世界があなたを待ち受けます。午後11時から午前1時まで。月曜チャレンジ、火曜ディスカバリーサイエンス、水曜シビリゼーション、木曜
Too thick to drink, too thin to plow.
The Colorado River, before we plugged it with dams, was a maverick river. It ran almost too thick to drink. You could almost walk across it with the silt that it carried. And it was always dirty, whether it was running 10,000 cubic feet per second or 100,000 cubic feet per second. It was carrying its full capacity of silt. The explorer that came up from the mouth of the river said when he got there, he said, I'm probably the last person who will ever use this river. It said, there's nothing here.
The water was so valuable that attempts were made to irrigate California's Imperial Valley with canals. The results were disastrous. In 1905, the river flooded 150 square miles with water 60 feet deep.
I think the words that would easiest spring to mind of the earlier river was useless and destructive and dangerous. First thing that had to be done is tame those annual floods, and that was the prime purpose behind Hoover Dam. Stop the flooding.
Serious speculation about building a great dam went back as far as 1902. For nearly 2 decades, scores of possible sites were surveyed and studied. The search narrowed to 2 locations with the right geology and terrain for a huge dam. In 1922, the Reclamation Service recommended building a dam at or near Boulder Canyon. The decision to build was made in 1928 when Congress passed the Boulder Canyon Project Act. The name Boulder Dam stuck and caused confusion for years to come. While the dam was still a dream, the country plunged into the nightmare of the Great Depression. In 1929, the stock market crash of October 29th was known as Black Tuesday. In the next 3 years, 13 million people lost their jobs. The unemployment rate shot up above 23%. Hopes of Americans plummeted.
The Great Depression.
トラベル&アドベンチャー。金曜パワーゾーン。月曜から金曜の夜はディスカバリーチャンネル。
자 그사나게 제비 그사나게 깨유 나니마 어콜루 하베비 저비 하레비 저비 그사나게 제비
世界最大の大陸、私たちのふるさと、アジアンアワー毎週放送。アジア各地の風土、人、そしてそこに息づく精神を映します。アジアンアワー毎週土曜ディスカバリーチャンネル。
Behind Hoover Dam is the largest man-made reservoir in North America. Lake Mead holds enough water to cover the state of New York 1 foot deep. Filling the reservoir actually warped the Earth's crust and caused earthquakes. All that water presses on the dam with about 80 billion pounds of pressure.
80 billion pounds is, well, I always like to figure things out in terms of elephants. That's about 1.5 million elephants. Or in maybe more modern ways of looking at it, that's about 100,000 fully loaded 727s. Standing down at the foot of the dam, looking up, my reaction to it was, wow, we can do that?
It's as massive as the pyramids and as beautiful as the Taj Mahal. It was a gorgeous sight.
It changed forever the character of the Southwest.
There was no other dam to compare with it. It was the dam.
It's an engineering feat.
That's a lot of concrete.
Sun, surf, and high living. Hollywood glitterati. The ultimate icon of the West Coast is Los Angeles. But without one single great structure, it might all become dust. Thousands of acres of rich farmland would dry up. The Southwest would return to desert. The City of Angels would go dark. Because the growth of Los Angeles was powered not by the famous California sunshine, but by water. Water from the Colorado River, harnessed by the greatest dam ever built. No construction job was so ambitious. The sheer size of Hoover Dam gets lost in the numbers. For comparison, the Statue of Liberty stands proudly at 305 feet. The Great Pyramid sits at 449 feet, while the Washington Monument soars to more than 555 feet. Hoover Dam rises triumphantly to 726 feet tall. At the crest, Hoover is just 45 feet wide, but that's plenty of room for a busy road connecting Arizona and Nevada. At the base, it spreads to 660 feet thick. There is enough concrete in the dam to build a two-lane highway from Los Angeles to Boston. Hoover is a gigantic, awe-inspiring structure.
To stand on that deck of the power plant and hear those turbines silently churning out pollution-free energy, and to look up at that massive, massive and beautiful structure of concrete, as massive as the pyramids and as beautiful as the Taj Mahal. It was a gorgeous sight. I marveled that man was capable of designing and planning and constructing such a magnificent structure. And I couldn't help but think that those other monuments, the pyramids and Taj Mahal, were monuments to the dead. But here was a monument to the living. This was creating energy and storing floodwaters and making possible the irrigation of thousands of acres of land and the municipal industrial water supplies for millions of people. It's a magnificent structure and a very useful one.
The Colorado River started as just a trickle of melting snow high in the Rocky Mountains. Gathering water from 7 western states, it carved the spectacular Grand Canyon. The river flowed past the dam site, sliced through the Mojave and Sonoran deserts, and ran 50 miles through Mexico into the Gulf of California. The river was so silty, it was said to be